Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Connie Reyes. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Connie Reyes was born in 1932 and was raised outside Manila in the Philippines. In order to attend college to become a teacher, Connie moved to the United States. She taught at various schools in Kenosha, Wisconsin. In the late 1960s, Connie decided to change careers. She returned to college and earned a master's degree in social work. She found a job as a social worker with the Department of Social Services. Her job involved protecting children who found themselves in unfortunate situations. Connie often tried to keep families together rather than removing children from their parents' care, but this wasn't always possible. On occasion, she would ask the court to remove children and place them in foster care. One child with whom Connie interacted was named Linda Dancer. Connie removed Linda from her mother's care, which resulted in Linda growing up in 3 different foster homes. As she grew older, Linda experienced a number of problems in romantic relationships. By the age of 25, she had 3 daughters who she was raising on her own. In 1985, Linda met a man named Gaylord Gomez, and the couple became romantically involved. They married this same year. Even though Linda was now an adult and had children of her own, Connie Reyes was still involved in her life. Linda did not do a very good job at raising her 3 daughters, and she put them in harm's way. Years earlier, Connie had worked to protect Linda. Now she felt as though she needed to protect Linda's children. Sometime in late 1989 or early 1990, Connie removed Linda's 3 daughters from her care and placed them in foster care. This removal of the children was not necessarily permanent. Linda had supervised visitation and was hoping to regain custody at some point in the future. Before moving to the timeline of the crime, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, Stamps.com.
Remaining flexible in your workday is one of the keys to success. For instance, focusing on the important parts of the business that only you can do. With Stamps.com, tedious tasks like sending certified mail, invoices, checks, documents, and packages can be done on your time, not someone else's. Stamps.com simplifies your postage needs and adds valuable flexibility back into your workday. Stamps.com handles all your mailing and shipping needs whenever, wherever. Seamlessly connect with every major marketplace and shopping cart if you sell products online. Access all the USPS and UPS services you need to run your business right from your computer or phone, anytime, day or night, no lines, no traffic, and no waiting. Have more flexibility in your life with Stamps.com. Sign up at Stamps.com/Dr. Grande for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com/Dr. Grande.
Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Thursday, April 12, 1990, Connie Reyes was scheduled to supervise Linda's visitation with her daughters, but canceled because she felt sick. This may have been related to Connie having diabetes. At around 11 a.m., Connie left work, drove to her house, and entered through the back door. After this, nobody heard from Connie. 2 days later, on Saturday, April 14, 1990, 2 of Connie's friends stopped by her house after becoming concerned about her welfare. One of them had a key and made entry into Connie's house. They discovered Connie's body face down on the floor and called 911. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. Connie had been strangled and was the victim of an assault of a sexual nature. There was no forced entry into her house, and nothing had been stolen. A pubic hair from a male was found at the scene, and there was a partial fingerprint on a pair of eyeglasses. Based on the number of newspapers piled up at her front door, the police believed that Connie had been murdered on Thursday, April 12th, the day she left work early due to feeling unwell. Neighbors did not see anything out of the ordinary around the time Connie was killed. The police wondered if an angry lover may have killed Connie, but she had never been married or been in any type of romantic relationship. The most likely source of enemies for Connie would have been developed through her career as a social worker, but the police didn't find any evidence connecting any of her clients to her murder. The case went cold. Over the years, the police had a few leads. For example, in 1995, a number of teenage Satan worshippers confessed to Connie's murder, but investigators determined they were lying. The police identified a man who said that he forced his way into Connie's house On the weekend that she was murdered, he was angry at Connie because she would not help him learn how to read. The man seemed like a good potential suspect, but his family hired an attorney, and he stopped talking to the police. The man had mental health symptoms, and investigators were not convinced that he killed Connie. They continued to look for other potential suspects. When DNA technology improved enough to test the evidence from the crime scene, it was discovered that the evidence had been stored improperly. None of it was testable. The police were back to square one. It did not appear as though Connie's murder would ever be solved. All this changed on February 25, 2003, almost 13 years after the murder, when the police received a tip from a woman named Linda Gulan. This is the second Linda in this story, a different Linda than Linda Dancer. To avoid confusion between these two Lindas, I will refer to Linda Gulan as Mrs. Gulan. Here is what Mrs. Gulan told the police. She was married to a man named Chester Gulan. The couple had lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin, before moving to Mississippi. Mrs. Gulan and Chester stayed with a friend of theirs named Sandra, but Chester aggravated Sandra by stealing her silverware and pawning it. Sandra contacted the police with the intent of having Chester arrested for the theft. Frightened about being arrested, Chester pleaded with Sandra not to pursue charges, saying that the police in Kenosha were looking for him. Chester claimed that he was involved in the homicide of a social worker and could not go back to Wisconsin. He also implicated two accomplices, Linda Dancer and Gaylord Gomez. Again, on the day Connie was murdered, she had canceled an appointment to supervise Linda Dancer's visitation. Chester told Mrs. Gulan and Sandra about the social worker being the victim of an assault of a sexual nature. The police never released this information to the public. Investigators interviewed Chester after finding him in Tupelo, Mississippi. On March 10, 2003, after initially denying involvement, Chester admitted that he witnessed Connie's murder. Here is the story he supplied to the police. Linda Dancer was upset that Connie canceled the supervised visitation and decided to confront her at her house. Knowing that Connie would never answer the door for her or Gaylord, Linda Dancer told Chester to knock on Connie's door. As soon as Connie answered, Linda Dancer, Gaylord, and Chester forced their way into the house. Gaylord attacked Connie, eventually strangling her. Chester claimed that he left the house during the struggle and waited in the vehicle. Later, he changed his story, admitting that he was in the house the entire time, but still denied participating in the murder. He offered a bizarre detail about the murder, saying that as they left Connie's house, they sang the Alka-Seltzer jingle, "Pop, pop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is." Chester's confession was not corroborated by any physical evidence, but he was still arrested. The police decided to interview Linda Dancer and Gaylord Gomez, who by this point were divorced. The former lovers unwisely agreed to talk to the police. When confronted with Chester's confession, Linda Dancer admitted to being in Connie's house during the murder, but claimed that Gaylord acted alone when he strangled Connie. She had no idea Gaylord intended to kill Connie. Rather, they forced their way into the house simply to assault her. Not only was Linda innocent, she tried to protect Connie from Gaylord by standing in between them. Gaylord also admitted to being inside Connie's house during the murder, but placed all the blame on Chester. He claimed that Chester strangled Connie on his own. On March 11, 2003, Linda Dancer and Gaylord Gomez were arrested. In a surprising move, Gaylord pleaded guilty to first-degree intentional homicide as party to a crime. He later tried to withdraw his plea, but it was too late. Linda and Chester both went to trial and were convicted of murder. In 2004, all three perpetrators were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Gaylord Gomez will be eligible for parole in 2034. Linda Dancer was eligible for parole in 2080 at the age of 121, but she died in 2020 at 61 years old. She just needed to hang in there for another 60 years to reach that parole eligibility, but she couldn't make it. Chester Gulan was eligible for parole in 2044 at the age of 103, but he died in 2007 at the age of 66. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Other than the confessions, there was no other evidence that the three perpetrators were guilty in this case. No video, no witnesses, no DNA, no fingerprints, nothing at all outside 3 confessions which did not match. If Chester had not confessed, the other 2 would have never been interviewed, so no confessions would have been made. Connie's murder would have remained unsolved. It appeared as though Chester only told his wife, Mrs. Goulon, and his friend Sandra about the murder to garner sympathy about his alleged theft of the silverware. Essentially, he was saying that if he was arrested for the theft, he would get in trouble for Connie's murder. In his mind, this was an effective argument. I think Chester believed that he was actually innocent, like he had nothing to do with killing Connie. He was just an observer who witnessed Gaylord commit a terrible crime. In his mind, this was currency that he could use at a later time. Chester thought that he possessed a get-out-of-jail-free card, like people would have compassion for him, believing he was a victim too. I also think it's possible that Chester was anxious and had feelings of guilt. He was constantly worried about being caught and unhappy about his involvement in the crime. When he was living in Mississippi, he was paranoid, always concerned that law enforcement was going to catch up to him. Chester wanted that anxiety to go away and thought that telling people would help. This was a catastrophic mistake. One can make a decent argument that Chester did not know Gaylord was going to murder Connie. Chester had no criminal record. He had a good employment history. He had served in the military. And after Connie's murder, he largely stayed out of trouble. The only problem he ran into was being accused of stealing the silverware from Sandra. Even so, Chester participated in gaining entry to Connie's house, which meant that he was looking at felony murder even if he did not participate in the homicide itself. Ultimately, instead of receiving a get-out-of-jail-free card, Chester actually received a go-to-jail-for-free card. This card was loaded with a life sentence. As far as Gaylord, I think he confessed because he believed he could convince the police that Chester was the killer. He may not have realized that Linda pointed the finger at him. In Gaylord's final version of his story, he admitted that he was the one who strangled Connie, but claimed it was an accident. Gaylord was trying to grab Linda and accidentally strangled Connie instead. He was talking about strangulation like it was a gunshot, almost as if he aimed his strangulation at the wrong target and it accidentally discharged. This has to be one of the laziest lies in history to convince people that a homicide was unintentional. Moving to Linda, just like Chester, even if Linda's story was true, she would be guilty of felony murder. She admitted that she forced her way into Connie's house with the intent to commit an assault. Connie died during this attack. Therefore, Linda is guilty, just like the other 2. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. When Linda was a child, her family life was unstable. Social services, in the form of Connie Reyes, intervened, removed Linda from a hazardous situation, and placed her in foster care. Connie was hoping to save Linda and give her a chance to be a productive citizen. Unfortunately, Connie's efforts failed. It seems as though there was nothing more that Connie could have done. Connie was simply an agent of a broken system, one that guards against one type of damage while sometimes causing another. She wasn't given the tools necessary to protect Linda in the long run, only in the short run. When Linda had her own children, she perpetuated the cycle of chaos and mistreatment. Linda transformed into exactly what Connie was trying to avoid. She became a testament to the failure of the system, a reminder of how sometimes it really is too late to save someone. With the seeds of destruction planted, all Connie could do was wait for Linda's antisocial traits to grow. She maintained a degree of concern about Linda's propensity to be dangerous. For example, Connie would not have opened the door of her house if Linda had knocked. Linda understood this as well. Clearly, the relationship between Connie and Linda was strained. Linda became angry when Connie became sick and could not supervise visitation of her daughters. She conspired with Gaylord to murder Connie. Chester was only brought in to help gain entry to the house. Linda's homicidal plan was an unexpected move. It really didn't help her in any way. Connie's death would not provide Linda with more options of seeing her children. This murder was perpetrated simply to get revenge. From Linda's perspective, Connie had been in her life long enough, and she was tired of it. Linda didn't like Connie always being in charge, always being the one who controlled who she could see. Connie was a constant reminder of Linda's troubled upbringing, a constant reminder of her own inferior parenting skills. Connie participated in 2 major transitions in Linda's life. removing her from her parents' care, and later removing her daughters. The third and final transition would be supplied by Linda herself. By committing murder, she made prison her new permanent placement. Those are my thoughts on the case of Connie Reyes. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.